The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jamison Rabbit. I'm here to talk about a bunch of movies with you. I don't have anyone joining me this week, so you and I are going to have a direct conversation. I just want to talk about some movies that I watched this past week. There were some really interesting ones for sure. And so I want to start with what we have on the marquee this week. The first movie I went and saw is a film called Watcher. It is a Romanian thriller from director Chloe Okuno. It stars Micah Monroe as a lady named Julia. Julia and her husband Francis, who is played by Carl Glusman, have moved to Bucharest for his new job. He speaks the language, but she does not. And the film kind of gives you a taste of what that feels like. In the opening minutes of the film, there are conversations happening in Romanian with a cab driver and the landlady that of the building that they're moving into, but they're not subtitled, which threw me at first. I thought maybe we didn't have the subtitles on in the theater, but it's really meant to put you in the same boat as Julia, where she doesn't understand what's being said around her, and she's really at the mercy of her husband to explain everything that's going on. And so I found that really effective right away. But Julia does notice right away the first night they moved to Bucharest that as she's kind of scanning the windows in the buildings around her apartment, she notices the silhouette of a man seemingly watching her. And to be sure, it's unnerving to see anytime you're looking around and you just see this silhouette of a person staring at you in a window. And to compound her fear, there's also been recent reports of a possible serial killer attacking young women in their apartments in the area. And so Julia becomes obsessed with this figure that she sees, convinced that he's staring at her. She begins to see him everywhere, but is never able to get a look at his face, and we don't either. It's always obscured or blurred or whatever. We are never quite sure who this guy is, but whether it's real or a fiction of her mind or playing tricks on her, she just starts seeing this guy everywhere she looks. She alerts her husband, Francis, of course, but he dismisses most of her concerns as a paranoia and that she needs to just relax. And one of the things that really drove me nuts during the early parts of this film was that the apartment that they moved into had no window treatments at all, just wide open picture windows into their home, and that gave me my own personal anxiety. And she would stand in front of this picture window and stare at this figure across the street from her in this other apartment. And all I'm thinking is, get some blinds. Don't let this guy stare through. Like, it's unnerving to me to have like zero privacy in your home. But Julia does meet someone in her apartment building who lives right next door, a young woman named Irina, who is a dancer, who believes Julia and her stories and offers her some advice with dealing with maybe a stalker. She's dealt with it a lot as a dancer. But her husband, Francis, still continues to be really dismissive of her. And he does something that's really irritating, which he kind of leaves her out of conversations at parties, speaking only in Romanian, trading jokes and having fun with friends and coworkers, knowing that Julia, his wife, doesn't understand what's being said, and he really excludes her from conversations, which is really isolating for her, and just a horrible thing to do to someone. And his response is really lacking too. When they know that there is a killer on the loose, walking the streets, and she says she's worried she sees this guy following her, and he poo-poos it. Just a terrible response. The film does a good job of really slowly ratcheting up the tension. Kind of keeps, keeping the mystery man out of focus really helps with that. It makes you really question, though, at one point of who's following who, as Julia becomes obsessed with this figure. And it doesn't necessarily go the way you might expect from my explanation and maybe the trailer you just saw, but Micah Monroe is really good, I believe, as the young woman with mounting anxiety. She also, I don't know if you noticed if you're watching, she has a striking resemblance to a young Gwen Stefani, which was kind of unnerving because it's really there. And so that was kind of unnerving for me. But the cinematography in this movie is really great. It almost gives it a Rear Window feel to it, which I really enjoy, one of Hitchcock's classics. And it builds a nice amount of tension and anxiety for this thriller. It is Romanian and English, so sometimes there's subtitles at certain points, but mostly it's in English, set in Romania. But it's an enjoyable film that's playing in theaters right now. I give Watcher 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's worth the watch. Go check it out. No pun intended. But that's the first one we have on the marquee this week. Now I move on to a very wild movie. It is David Cronenberg's newest film called Crimes of the Future. This is David Cronenberg's first directorial feature film since 2014. The legendary director who makes some films that are not the most accessible for his audience. A director who never placates an audience. He's known, of course, for his use of body horror. But this film is a film that stars Viggo Mortensen as a man named Saul Tenser. It's a difficult film to explain, especially without giving too much away, but it's set in the near future where humans have resorted to surgical procedures to adapt their bodies and attempt to exceed the human condition, to advance their human bodies above the normal condition. And the film, you saw it right away in this trailer if you're watching, the film opens with a young child who's sitting on the beach, and his mother tells him, hey, don't eat anything that you find out there. And next thing you see is him eating a garbage can, because there are some people in this world who have adapted, whether surgically or through biological form, have adapted their organs to be able to process industrial waste. And there's a section of the populace like this, and the government is trying to get rid of these people. We also have in this world, it's a world where surgery and pain has kind of replaced sex. Sex is basically found through surgery and pain. It's a weird movie. Viggo Mortensen's character of Saul Tenser is a man who has found a way for his body to produce new organs inside of it, naturally produce new organs, some of which have never been seen before, organs that no one has. And he and his partner, Caprice, played by Léa Seydoux, are also performance artists, which manifests into these underground shows that they do, in which she performs surgery on him to remove the new organs. And of course, it's fascinating and it's sexual for them, and it's kind of disturbing to watch at points, and that's kind of the heart of Cronenberg picture. Caprice really cares for him though, and sees that he's struggling at times, but it's kind of weird. Surgical foreplay is kind of disturbing at points. It's a rough watch, but Saul is suffering. His body is working against him. His life is spent using some wild contraptions to help him sleep, to help him eat, some really nightmare fuel contraptions. He eats by sitting in this chair that's seemingly made out of like bone and sinew, and works him over basically to help him digest and swallow food. He sleeps in a bed that's it's straight out of Nightmare with things attached to him. One unit that he uses, though, that they both use, is a spark unit that was made for autopsies, at-home autopsies, apparently. And they use it for their surgical procedures, for their performance art. This is the machine that Viggo's character gets into for these performances. We also have Kristen Stewart in this film as a scientist named Timlin, who her job is basically to catalog all these new organs that are being created, and just to keep the database really of everything that's happening with all of these people changing their physical makeup. She also forms a bit of an obsession with Saul and his spark machine. She wants to have surgery performed by him in the sexual manner that it is. And she's kind of obsessed with this guy. There's also a group of people who are trying to change their bodies in order to ingest industrial waste. People are kind of seeing the human body as a blank slate that they can modify for various reasons. And I mean, you saw probably there in the trailer a minute ago, there's even a performance artist there who sews his eyes and his mouth shut and had like a couple dozen human ears attached to him as an art piece. This is the Cronenberg world we're living in. So there's some intense visuals in this movie, no doubt. The film seems to be one that's trying to understand human bodies and pain, and that what I took away is pain has a function, and when you eliminate that function that pain serves, what does it mean to be human anymore? And there's some tough imagery here, and no doubt Cronenberg pushes the limits. I was really hoping for more from this film, though. It left a lot of threads hanging, a lot of background characters that we kind of got to know a little bit, got a tiny bit of motivation on, and it felt like it had, for everything that was included in this movie, that it kind of had a soft landing. I was expecting to really drive something home. And I feel like Cronenberg, as a director, kind of has two different tracks that he likes to work with. There's the really gory body horror movies, and then there's the films that talk about civilization and mankind and where we're at and where we should be going. And this movie felt like it was really trying to meld those two together more than a lot of films that he's done in the past. And that kind of left a little bit of the disappointment on my mouth, was because I didn't think that it fully cohered once we got to the end of it. But it kind of gives this message of humanity and technology that I didn't think it hit right. But it had me fully engaged. My mind was working during it, and my mind was working afterwards to try and understand everything that I saw, and it grossed me out at points. And I think in that way I was fairly satisfied, because David Cronenberg is a filmmaker. If you've seen any of his stuff or seen interviews with him, he doesn't care what you think about his movie. If you hate his movie, I think he almost enjoys it when people say they're grossed out by his films. And he knows he's not going to be for everyone. And this film isn't going to be for everyone as well. But I enjoyed the majority of this film. And so for Crimes of the Future, I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you listen to this review or watch the trailer and were intrigued by it, I would recommend it. If you have any queasy feelings about it, I would say steer clear. It's not for everyone, and that's okay. Now, next we go to our streaming spotlight this week, where we go to Netflix for the newest film from director Richard Linklater. This is a film called Apollo 10.5, A Space-Age Childhood. It is a film that is, you can see right here, it's an animated film, but not like a hand-drawn. It's done in rotoscope, and it's narrated by Jack Black. And so, like many of Linklater's films, it offers a nostalgic look back on a portion of a young man's life growing up, and kind of a portion of his own childhood. It follows a boy named Stan, who is portrayed by Milo Coy in real life. He kind of serves as the surrogate for Richard Linklater's memories. This movie is set in 1969 in a Houston suburb during the race to the moon. I mean, a huge time in America, in the world, a time of revolt. It's Woodstock. It's the race to the moon. It's there's a lot of things going on in the streets, but he's giving it from a perspective of basically a young kid. The interesting part is we see here is it's animated via rotoscope, which takes actual actors and gives them the animated feel that can kind of sometimes fall into the very realistic realm, sometimes feel kind of eerie. And so there are actual actors in here that you would recognize. And it's narrated, I said, lovingly by Jack Black, which almost gives it like a Wonder Years feel, probably because of the time period and him narrating, basically telling his life growing up as this young boy. And the story's an interesting one because it also weaves between beautiful, nostalgic moments and memories of childhood at the time and what family life was like, but it's also a childhood fantasy of Stan, who fantasizes about being called up to fly to the moon because NASA had built a space capsule that was just a little too small for those astronauts to fit into, so they came looking for a young child, and apparently this was a fantasy that Richard Linklater had as a child. And so the film kind of alternates between his regular life as a child and explaining so many great things, and then cutting back to the family is watching the mission to the moon, Neil Armstrong, and we cut to his fantasies of him being the kid in the capsule. And so much of this film is really like a comfy remembrance of his childhood, recounting all the things that made that time so great. It kind of gave me secondhand nostalgia for it. Some of the things that obviously I wasn't around for, but a lot of things that I could relate to as a child of the 80s. And some things I only accessed through, pop culture myself. But we see pop culture is a big important thing to Linklater, and in this film, he lists off the television shows that the family watched growing up. He and his siblings, all the various television shows of that era, very lovingly. He talks about the music of that era. We see his sisters wanting to watch the Dick Cavett show because you have various music artists on there, and then, of course, talking about the movies of that time. And one of the things I loved is showing the family, the dad finding a way to sneak in 2 of their 6 kids into the back of the station wagon when they go to the drive-in movie. And he recounts some of the movies that he remembers seeing at the drive-in. And it's great. And it's very loving. And it also kind of talks about, he shows some of the ways that kids entertain themselves in that time without the technology to do all the lifting like we have today. And it's really enjoyable. It really is fun to see as he talks about, in that time, we didn't know we shouldn't be following the DDT fogger that came down the streets for the mosquitoes. And my mom would kick us out of the house. And all of these things that he remembers while also alternating with this very important time of the race to the moon. And so the movie kind of gives this message of really embracing childhood, shows how strange and fascinating the world is from a child's perspective. It's a loving look at family, but also it kind of delves into the tedium of being a kid sometimes, and how there's not always something entertaining to do, especially at that time when you couldn't just pick up a phone or an iPad. That for a child, sometimes it was just kind of tedious. You had to make up games or just you couldn't watch the show you wanted to watch because there wasn't DVRs and all that. And if your dad wanted to watch Walter Cronkite, you didn't get to watch what you wanted to watch. And so I really enjoyed so much of this film. I think that the rotoscoping animation kind of gives it a Saturday morning cartoon feel, and I think that was purposeful by Linklater. I don't think that was a mistake. And again, Jack Black was really an inspired choice to do the animation because it's a familiar voice, and he provided a lot through that. So Apollo 10.5 is streaming right now on Netflix, and I recommend it by giving it a 4 out of 5 star score. It's worth the time. It's enjoyable. I think you can sit down with the whole family and watch this and really enjoy it and have a discussion afterwards. So our movie throwback this week, I bring back the movie throwback segment. We haven't had a movie throwback in quite a while because it's been a wild time in the movie theaters. I've had some great special guests, and we've had a lot of movies to talk about. But this week, obviously, being here by myself, I decided to bring back the movie throwback segment, and I brought back not 1, but 2 movies to talk about. Why would I do that? I'll tell you. The first movie that I'm going to talk about is an all-time classic, a film that I had not seen beginning to end in my life. I'd seen parts and pieces of, and it's a film that comes out of my favorite genre, and so I always had a bit of movie watcher embarrassment that I had never seen this film all the way through. And I'm talking about 1974's Chinatown, directed by Roman Polanski. Stars Jack Nicholson as a man named Jake Gittes. Jake is a detective that's set in 1937. He's a private detective who has a dame in trouble come walking into his office. She asks him to find out whether her husband, who is chief engineer of the Los Angeles water utility, is having an affair, and she sets him out on a case that is anything but ordinary as we watch Jake wind his way through the complex mystery, trying to figure out what her motives are. Along the way, he has to dodge cops and some nefarious guys' fists and come out dry on the other side. Also stars Faye Dunaway as Evelyn Mulray, the lady, the damsel in distress, I guess, although not so much in distress. And a rich cast of great actors from a previous era. John Huston as Noah Cross is great in this. And it's a story that gets Jake tangled up with some nefarious plans as Los Angeles is facing a drought. Boy, that sounds familiar. And this story becomes one that's embroiled in fat cats who are trying to control the water supply to certain areas of Los Angeles. Not everyone is who they seem, and no one reveals their true motives easily. And this is Jack Nicholson in his prime for me. Perfect in the role as the hard-boiled detective in this modern film noir. His mouth gets him in and out of trouble. He's seen a lot. He's got favors to call in. Faye Dunaway is tremendous in this film. And I know Roman Polanski is a hot button as a person, but this film is an all-time classic. I understand why it's on the AFI list of the 100 greatest films. When I watched it here this past week, I went and gave it a 5-star rating. It's great. I mean, and I'm a sucker for noir films, but Nicholson is tremendous in this movie. And so to kind of pair up with this, they came back, this was 1974 when Polanski made this film. 1990, we returned. Now, Polanski wasn't back to make this because, well, he's in hiding for being a terrible person. But Jack Nicholson returns in the director's chair this time for this film, in which his character of Jake returns for a film called The Two Jakes. This is set in a post-war 1940s. Jack Nicholson directing and starring in this as Jake. It's another detective adventure. This time, Jake is hired by another Jake. This time, a guy named Jake Berman, played by Harvey Keitel, who wants him to catch his wife, Kitty, cheating on him. Kitty, played by Meg Tilly in this film. And that's not what it seems, of course. And it involves a wire recording that was made that could be very incriminating, and everyone wants this wire recording that Jake has. Of course, he's not one to quickly give anything up to anyone. And as in Chinatown, the simple case kind of begins unraveling other things. There's a tract of land that is being sought after. There's possible oil reserves, where the first film was about water, this film is about oil. And of course, there's a dame who could spell trouble for everyone. The love interest we see here in the trailer is a lady named Lillian Bodine, played by Madeline Stowe. And this film is a fine film noir, but the difference in directing is noticeable. The difference from Roman Polanski, who's a great director, terrible person, great director, and Jack Nicholson, who really wasn't a director. It's very noticeable in this. Also, 26 years later, do my math, 16 years later, Nicholson just seems less energetic in this one, in front of the screen. I really liked how it started with his interactions with Harvey Keitel as the titular two Jakes, kind of going back and forth. And it's interesting. And it's fun to watch these two guys going back and forth, but it felt like either Nicholson at this point just had lost the energy, perhaps trying to pull double duty of directing and starring might have been a little too much for him at this time. I don't know what it is, but it felt like this film kind of failed to maintain a consistency that I was looking for. It was also, doing a little research, was very interesting to me that this film, a sequel of an all-time classic, came out a couple of months before Godfather 3. Both movies trying to really recapture and build upon legendary predecessors. Of course, Godfather 3 famously struggled to live up to the hype of the first two as well. And this series was actually meant to be a trilogy. Nicholson and the creative minds behind these two films were hoping to do a third one that dealt with, I believe it was about pollution out in LA, and it just never got off the ground. This Two Jakes wasn't a huge success, and I think it just got left by the wayside. So we never got that final film in the Jake Gittes detective trilogy. But Chinatown, as I said, is a 5-star film. The Two Jakes is a good film. It's inconsistent. I believe I gave it 3 or 3.5 stars. It's a fine follow-up. Just struggles to live in the shadow of an all-time classic. So fun to talk about some legendary movies though that I hadn't seen. It's fun to get those into the old memory bank. Let's take a look ahead though at what is coming soon. I'm looking at the weekend of June 17th as summer movie season is full in swing. That weekend we have a few films to talk about. The first one is Lightyear. This is the Disney Pixar prequel to find out how Buzz Lightyear came to be. I'm sure you've seen this trailer, but Buzz Lightyear no longer voiced by Tim Allen. Of course, this is a younger Buzz Lightyear voiced by Chris Evans in here. And we find out how he got into Space Command and became the Buzz Lightyear that we all know and love. That's going to be coming to theaters. We also have, over on streaming, we have on Apple TV a film called Cha-Cha Real Smooth, which is writer, director, and star Cooper Raif's new film it's also co-starring Dakota Johnson, about a man who is a bar mitzvah party host who strikes up a relationship, a friendship with a mother and her autistic daughter. And again, that will be over on Apple TV. Over on Netflix, a film that I've been looking forward to quite a bit for the last year and a half or so. We're finally getting, I was convinced for a while that this wasn't even a real thing. It's a film called Spiderhead. Joseph Kosinski's new film. Joseph Kosinski, of course, the director of Top Gun Maverick. So he has the #1 movie in the world right now. And then he has a very interesting film that stars some of the stars of Top Gun Maverick as well. It's a film about convicts who are offered a chance in this alternate future. They're offered a chance to be medical testing subjects in order to shorten the length of their sentences. This film stars Miles Teller, Chris Hemsworth, and Charles Parnell, who was also in Top Gun Maverick, and sounds really interesting to me. And then the last film we have is over on Paramount Plus. We have a film called Jerry and Marge Go Large. This stars Bryan Cranston and Annette Bening as the titular characters of Jerry and Marge, as a couple who win the lottery and use the money to revive their small town. Also stars Rainn Wilson and Michael McKean, based on a true story, actually. So I don't know how much that matters, but that is over on Paramount Plus. So a lot of streaming options for you the weekend of June 17th. Before I move any further, though, I want to thank our sponsor, the folks who put me into a dream lounger and allow me to watch all these films that we bring to you each and every week for 425 consecutive weeks. Marcus Theaters, The Palace here in Sun Prairie, thank you for sponsoring this program. It's a great joy to go there. I'll be going there as soon as I get out of the studio to watch this week's new blockbuster. So we thank them for everything they do. As I said, next week, I'm going to be talking about another huge summer blockbuster, probably the movie that may supplant Top Gun Maverick from the top of the box office charts. We'll see. We have Jurassic World Dominion, which brings back all the gang from all the previous movies. Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum. I'm so excited for that. And then we also have Adam Sandler's new movie, Hustle, which is playing over on Netflix right now. Also going to have a movie throwback segment, which I'm very excited for because it's a film that I don't remember, so I get to rewatch a film. And I am going to be joined by my son, Logan, who has been on the show a few times in the past. And it's always a great joy to be joined by my son here in studio. So I hope you tune in and check that out. If you want to find more from us, you can find us on social media. We're over there on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Real Reviews TV, at Real Reviews TV, I believe, is the best way to find us. Real Reviews K-Sun, another great way to find us. And be sure to check us out. Share it with your friends. Let everyone know that you like watching some real reviews. We do appreciate that. But until next week, when I'm talking about dinosaurs, basketball players, and all kinds of fun stuff, I'm Jamison, and thanks for watching.